The first phone call I ever made in a crisis was to my mother. The last phone call she ever needed to make in hers was to me. That's not a coincidence. That's a bond built over 53 years, one ordinary act of love at a time. Rebecca Watson was not a complicated woman. She didn't need to be. She was the kind of mother who showed up to every single one of my Little League games in a folding chair she brought herself. Who packed my lunch until I was old enough to be embarrassed about it, and who sat up waiting every time I came home late. Not to punish me, but because she simply couldn't sleep until she knew I was safe. That was her. That was always her. Love wasn't something Rebecca Watson talked about. It was something she did daily, quietly, without keeping score. When my father passed 12 years ago on a Wednesday morning in November, the kind of day that permanently changes the color of a month, she didn't fall apart. She grieved the way she did everything else, with dignity and her chin up. She sold one car to cover the funeral costs without telling me until it was done, kept the house running on a fixed income, and still managed to have a hot meal on the table every Sunday for anyone who showed up. She never once called me to say she was struggling, not once in 12 years. So understand when Rebecca Watson called me at 7:42 on a Wednesday morning and said her chest felt funny, I didn't hesitate. I didn't calculate. I didn't weigh my options. Because 53 years of that woman's love doesn't produce a man who hesitates. It produces a man who moves immediately, without question, without condition. What it doesn't prepare you for is the person standing between you and the door. My name is Wesley Watson. I'm 53 years old. I coach youth baseball on weekends. And I have been the kind of husband who thought that keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. I was wrong. It took me a while, but I got there. It was a Wednesday, January 14th, 7:42 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing in the kitchen watching the coffee drip slowly, like it too didn't want the day to start. When my phone buzzed on the counter, "Mom," I picked up on the second ring, "Wesley." Her voice was thin, not her usual voice. Rebecca Watson didn't do thin. This woman had survived a husband, a recession, and a hip replacement without asking anyone for a single thing. "Mom, you okay?" "I didn't want to bother you, there it is." 82 years old and still apologizing for existing. "Funny how," I said, already moving toward the hallway. "Just tight and my left arm keeps going numb." "Mom, stop." "I'm coming." I hung up and stood there for exactly 3 seconds. My truck, a 2019 Chevy Silverado, was sitting at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street. Alternator. They'd called yesterday. Wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Okay, think, Wesley. Think Eve's car, a silver Honda CR-V, sat fat and unbothered in the driveway. Full tank, she'd filled it up herself on Monday. Eve was upstairs. I could hear the shower running. That long, luxurious 30-minute shower she took every morning like she was preparing for a photo shoot. I went to the bottom of the stairs. "Eve." The shower kept running. "Eve." The water stopped. A long pause. "What?" Not "what is it?" In concern. "What?" "In this better be important, I need to borrow your car. My mom's having chest pains. I need to take her to St. Francis. I'll be right back." Silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone has already decided and is just deciding how to say it. She appeared at the top of the stairs 30 seconds later, towel on her head, robe tied at the waist, face completely unreadable. "Wesley, I can't today. Eve, my mom's having chest pains." Her left arm, "I heard you." She leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "Call an ambulance." She doesn't like ambulances. You know that. She had a bad experience when Dad, "Then call someone else." She was already turning back toward the bedroom. "I have dinner with Joanne and the girls tonight, and I still have a full day of work. I'm not going to spend my whole day sitting in a hospital waiting room." I stood completely still. Did she just... "Eve." My voice came out quieter than I expected. Her left arm is going numb. She stopped, turned halfway, and looked at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Not concern, not guilt, inconvenience. "She's your mother, Wesley, not mine." A pause. "Figure it out." She went back into the bedroom. The door didn't slam. That almost made it worse. A slam would have meant emotion. She just closed it gently, like she'd told me we were out of milk. Like an 82-year-old woman's left arm going numb was a minor scheduling conflict she didn't have room for. I stood there for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone. Clinton Webb lived 4 houses down. A retired union electrician, 71 years old, drove a well-kept older Honda Civic. He and my mother had known each other for over 20 years. He'd been at my father's funeral, front row. He picked up on the first ring. "Wes, what's up, brother?" "Clinton, I need a favor. My mom's having chest pains. My truck's in the shop. Eve's car isn't available. Can you take us to St. Francis?" Not even a pause. "Give me 4 minutes. I'll pull up front, that's it. No negotiation, no conditions, no dinner plans to check." 4 minutes. I called Mom back immediately. "I'm coming, Mom. Clinton's driving. You don't need to do anything. Just unlock the front door and sit down. You hear me? Sit down. Wesley, I really don't want to make a fuss. Yes, sit down." A small sound. Almost a laugh. "Okay, baby." Clinton pulled up in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I counted. The drive to St. Francis Hospital took 9 minutes. Mom sat in the back with me, her small hand in both of mine, wearing her good blue coat like she was going somewhere important, because she was. She kept apologizing the whole way there. "I'm sorry to drag you out, Clinton. It's nothing. I was just watching the news anyway. Was it anything good?" "Nothing ever is," she laughed. Actually laughed. And I looked out the window at the Hartford morning, and I felt 2 things at the exact same time. Gratitude for Clinton, and something cold and quiet for Eve. St. Francis was busy. We checked in at the ER at 8:27 a.m. A nurse named Beverly got Mom into a room within 15 minutes. The doctor on call was Dr. Raymond Cole. Calm voice, deliberate hands. "Mrs. Watson, I want to run an EKG and check your enzyme levels. The symptoms you're describing, we don't ignore those at your age." Mom looked at me. Her eyes were asking if she should be scared. "Do whatever he says, Mom," she nodded. Then she reached up and touched my face. "You came," she said simply, like she hadn't been completely sure I would. That nearly broke me. "Mom, I'll always come." She patted my cheek twice, lay back on the pillow, and closed her eyes. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Eve didn't text once. Not even, "Is she okay?" At 11:04, Dr. Cole came out. "Mr. Watson, your mother had what we call a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but her body was warning her. We want to keep her for observation, but she's stable." "She's stable." I stayed with Mom until 4 p.m. We watched half a game show, and she beat me twice at a word game she made up on the spot. At 3:47, just before I left, she took my hand again. "Wesley." "Yeah, Mom." Eve didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had dinner plans. She looked toward the window. The afternoon light was hitting the Hartford skyline just right, gold and quiet and tired. She didn't say anything else, but I saw something move across her face. Something that looked a lot like a decision. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 p.m. and walked out of St. Francis Hospital into the cold Connecticut air. Clinton came back to pick me up. We drove home in comfortable silence, and somewhere on Blue Hills Avenue with the oak leaves flying past the windshield, I realized I wasn't angry at Eve anymore. I was done. Thursday morning, I woke up before the alarm. Eve was still asleep, breathing slow and even, completely unbothered. I made coffee with the loud machine and didn't feel bad about it. She came downstairs in her robe, glanced at the coffee machine, then at me. "You made coffee." "Every morning for 11 years, I said. "It's still surprising?" She poured herself a cup. "How's Rebecca?" "Stable, mild cardiac event. They're keeping her another day," she repeated it slowly. "Another day. How was dinner?" I asked. She blinked. "It was fine." "Wesley, I want you to know yesterday was really complicated for me." "Complicated?" I let the word sit there. "Your mother-in-law's heart was sending distress signals and you were at a restaurant, but sure, complicated." "Wesley." "Eve." I said it the same way my mother said my name the night before. Just the word, flat and final. She stopped. I stood up, rinsed my mug, picked up my phone, my jacket, my keys, and walked to the door. "Where are you going?" "To see my mother." Clinton drove me again. He didn't ask questions, just drove with one hand on the wheel and an old country station playing low. Mom was sitting up when I got to her room. Color back in her face, crossword puzzle book open in her lap. 7 letters, she said the second I walked in. Betray. I stopped in the doorway and stared at her. For the crossword, Wesley. I laughed so hard the nurse looked in from the hallway. She looked up over her glasses. I want to call Paul this morning. Paul Logan, her attorney. I've been thinking since last night. Mom, you don't have to. Wesley Andrew Watson. Do not finish that sentence. I closed my mouth. She looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. I've worked my whole life. Your father and I scrimped and saved and went without, so that what we built would mean something. So it would go somewhere that mattered, to people who showed up. She reached for her phone and the folded piece of paper with Paul Logan's number. Do you want me to step out? No, stay. She dialed at 9:22 a.m. By the time Paul Logan clicked his pen closed and tucked his legal pad back into his briefcase, the document that Eve Watson had been silently counting on for 11 years of marriage had been fundamentally, revocably and legally rewritten. The house on Maplewood Drive, the investment accounts, the jewelry, the furniture, the 1967 Ford Mustang my father restored with his own hands, and $20,000 earmarked for the Hartford Animal Shelter. Eve's name appeared exactly 0 times. When Logan left, he shook my hand at the door. Your mother is one of the sharpest people I've met in 31 years of practice. I looked at her across the room, already back to her crossword, completely unbothered, completely herself. Yeah, I said. I know. I left the hospital at 4:30 p.m. Clinton drove me home. I got in, closed the door, and everything felt exactly the way it should be. Friday morning, my truck was finally ready. I was standing at the counter at Kowalski's when my phone started buzzing. Eve, again and again. Let it ring. I picked up my mother from the hospital at 8:53 a.m. She climbed into the passenger seat in her good blue coat, small overnight bag packed neatly, and smiled faintly out the window like someone who had made a decision and was completely at peace with it. I got her home to Maplewood Drive, made her tea exactly the way she liked it, and sat across from her at the kitchen table where she had made every birthday cake and helped me with algebra and held my hand the morning after my father died. She reached across the table and covered my hand with both of hers. I need you to hear me, Wesley. I'm not angry. I'm just accurate. Eve didn't show up. Not just yesterday. Not at your father's funeral. Not when I had the hip surgery. Not yesterday when my heart was failing. She went to dinner. She squeezed my hand once. You understand that? I did. And Wesley, her voice dropped just slightly, I need you to think about your life. About whether you are happy. About whether you are loved the way you deserve to be loved. Because you have been showing up alone for a very long time, baby. And a man like you deserves someone standing next to him when he does. The kitchen was absolutely still. Yeah, I said, my voice rough and quiet. I know, Mom. She patted my hand twice and released it. Good. My phone was buzzing on the table between us. Eve, call number 29. I looked at it, looked at Mom. She raised one eyebrow. I picked up the phone, turned it face down, and let it buzz against the wood until it stopped. Not yet, I said, the corner of her mouth moved just barely. Not yet. I left Maplewood Drive at 1:15 p.m. and drove home to Asylum Avenue. Eve was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch, both hands wrapped around her phone. Wesley, I've been calling you all day. I know. She stood up. Did you know about the will? Did you know she was going to? No. I found out with everyone else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. Talk to her. Ask her to reconsider. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. That I was going to come to the hospital. You just had dinner with Joanne and the girls while my mother was in a hospital bed with a cardiac event. Wesley, please. Rebecca made her decision, I said calmly. The same way you made yours. Clearly, deliberately, and without asking anyone's permission. She looked at me, really looked, and I watched something move across her face. Not just fear. The specific look of a person who has finally fully understood the size of what they lost. Not the money. Me. I picked up my keys from the hook. I'm going to check on my mother. I opened the front door. The Hartford air hit me, cold, clean, and completely free. Oh, I said, turning back one final time. Eve stood in the middle of the living room, phone in hand. My mother's name glowing on the screen. You should probably answer that. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't even know you'd been holding it. I stood on that porch for just a moment. The January air hit my face and something settled over me that I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and let the old country station play low. I didn't make any big decisions that night beyond one. I was not going back into that house. Not that night. And somewhere in the place where a man knows things before he's ready to say them out loud, I knew it wasn't just that night. Loyalty and love deserve a legacy. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw family stories. I'll see you in the next one.